are familiar with the BOD pod? Have you seen it? Have you used it? You had the old version.
Yeah, I never used it.
So the familiarity is, I guess, in this room would be Mary in your room.
Mary, yeah, David a little bit, and Bob, but
Okay.
I know probably more than anybody else.
So here's how the training is essentially going to be run. It's very easy, very laid back. What I'll do is I'm going to go over a brief history about the device, how it was created, a little bit about the science, and then from there we're going to have Brittany step in, and I'm going to show you a BOD pod test. I'm going to have Stacy run that test. Then from there we'll go into the classroom portion of the training, where we go through the manual and we go through the specifications of the BOD pod, the science. We talk about different physics principles. I know that sounds like a lot of fun, but it's fairly simplistic. And then from there I'll go more into the software and what you're seeing, the various frames and menus, and then what I want to do is have a practicum portion. So why I asked earlier who would be running the device, I want you to run a test, but I also want you to be tested. So you can be tested like these ladies in their BOD pod clothing, or just get in there in your clothing, your full clothing, because I want you to be able to convey what the subject will go through and what they can expect. And then you'll be certified. So we'll just do that. We'll group you up in teams. And then the last portion of the training would be talking about the quality control. Okay? Any questions at this point? So the BOD pod. Somebody mentioned a spaceship. A lot of people mentioned giant egg and so forth. It does have a unique appeal, a unique design. A little history about the company and the BOD pod. The technology is air displacement plethysmography. Say that like 5 or 6 times real fast. We just abbreviate it. ADP is the technology of the BOD pod. There was a researcher at UC Davis, her name's Susan Akins, and she was there in the early 90s, and she was doing, are you familiar with underwater weighing?
We've got a team.
Okay, so you're familiar with Archimedes' principle and underwater weighing and so forth. She was doing her master's thesis at UC Davis, and she was doing a research protocol with elderly and obese. And as you can imagine, it was very difficult to administer the underwater weighing or hydrostatic weighing test to those individuals because of the limitations. So ADP, the technology, had been around for years, but there wasn't a practical way for labs, hospitals, universities to use the technique. From what I've read is it was an hour test. You had to warm up the system for an hour and a half, so right there it would be practical. So Susan Akins and an engineer teamed up and they designed the BOD pod with the ADP technology. And that was, as I said, the early, middle 90s. And then in 1996, the company Life Measurement was formed and the first BOD pod was sold. So now, 15 years later, we are in the research world, if you will. That's our largest marketplace because that's where we started. And evidently, when the device was first launched, researchers looked at it. What is this, thing? What does this do? This has got to be a farce and so forth. And what they did is several research institutions purchased these devices, and they did all kinds of validation versus their hydrostatic tank. So this has probably been analyzed maybe more than any other body composition technique outside of skin fold calipers. So from 96 to present, we are in most of the major universities, so exercise science departments, nutrition departments. Even some schools have it in their student recreation facility. University of Minnesota has one in their student recreation facility. Also on college campuses, collegiate athletic programs. So the Ohio States, Michigans, USC, Florida's, they have one just in their athletic programs. Some of the other market areas that you'll see these in, maybe depending on your careers where you go, high-end health clubs, fitness facilities, hospitals. Mayo has one in their executive physical area, as well as their employee, it's the Dan Abrams Living Center, their employee fitness
Yeah,
center.
we sent interns there.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
So they'll encounter the BOD pod there, as well as cardiovascular rehab. Some of the other markets we're in, it's very unique and specialized, but we're in the military, Air Force, all branches, even the special forces. I would say one of the more unique placements we have is Walmart, but it's not in a Walmart store. They use it for employee wellness screenings, executive screenings, with the big push of prevention these days. So there's where you may see these devices. They're not ubiquitous because they're unique, but they're in those market areas.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned
Certainly.
that it's been validated against hydrostatic
Mhm.
weighing. How has, and I'm assuming against DEXA also, so can you say anything about the DEXA technology versus this?
Certainly. So if you ask one of the body composition gurus, so that would be Lohman, Dr. Ellis, David Fields, those are the individuals still doing or previously did a lot of body composition research. That was their forte, if you will. To a person, to a man, they'll indicate that the most accurate way outside of autopsy to assess body composition is a multi-compartment model. Multi-compartment model is where you're able to break the body into 4 or more sections. So how they do this, and it's unique, only their labs, and if a university sometimes is affiliated with a hospital, do they have the money, the technique, the equipment to do it. So typically they would use DEXA for bone, they would use hydrostatic weighing or the BOD pod for fat mass and fat-free mass. Those are 3 compartments there. And then some facilities do, through deuterium dilution, they're able to calculate chemically total body water. And then I know of a couple facilities, and Ken Ellis is one of them in Texas, where he has a potassium counter. I believe there's only 2 in the United States. So the potassium counter would assess muscle. So that would be a 5th component, if you will. So that is considered the most accurate way to assess body composition, but not as practical. So when the BOD pod is compared to the 4-compartment model, it compares very favorably. It's within plus or minus 2%. When DEXA is compared to the 4-compartment model, it does not compare favorably, which is very interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, many times the 4-compartment model uses a DEXA for the bone component. So you would think it would be slightly more accurate. Really, DEXA is great for a bone scan, osteoporosis. That's their forte. You can load software onto the DEXA to then do body composition, but hydrostatic weighing and the BOD pod, that is what they were created for, is body composition. And incidentally, hydrostatic weighing compares favorably to a multi-compartment model or a 4-compartment model as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So if you were to say, of the methods, which are the most accurate at this point, which would be now comparing the closest to like actually dissecting somebody and actually measuring all the fat, how would you rank the methods? Would you rank them like?
It depends on which researcher you talk to,
Okay.
but from what I hear and from talking to researchers, it's either the BOD pod or underwater weighing.
Okay.
And underwater weighing is great if it's an ideal situation because, as you know, Mary, the operator as well as the subject can influence the results. You'll see here later today, the operator, and I have confidence in Stacy, unless she does something, she just doesn't really read the directions because it's simplistic to operate, or maliciously, breaks protocol, she cannot influence the results. As well as Brittany. Unless Brittany breaks protocol, she really can't influence the results. With underwater weighing, I remember doing that in undergrad, and it's counterintuitive where you exhale out all your water and you go underwater, and I'm comfortable in water. So that comes into play. So that's why you see a lot of facilities integrating this, even if they have an underwater tank, or if they're looking at one versus the other, they're going with this because it's more practical. You can test a small child about 40 pounds to, this is the largest individual we've ever had in there,
Oh, it looks like a sumo.
Sumo wrestler, over 500 pounds. Now you couldn't do that in your tank over there.
No, we'd have to have this much water in it.
Exactly. So
Totally.
it's very practical, it's very versatile, and those are the advantages when you look at it versus hydrostatic weighing. The other thing, it's totally non-invasive. So anyone can be assessed in it, whether they're in a certain disease state, even if they claim to be claustrophobic, and I'll go into that a little later, that some of the other modalities, DEXA, has radiation. So there are no contraindications, which is nice.
The only downside, and it just depends on, on how much money you have, if we were to rank which one is the most expensive, we're talking one of the more expensive, even though you can get tanks, hydrostatic weighing tanks. Ours that we have in there is a kneeling submersion tank. It probably costs a little less than half of what it costs for us to buy this. So, you know, when we're looking at what method to use, some of it is what you have available to you.
Certainly.
And if you, so I think it's important to note all the advantages, but this is prohibitively expensive for some institutions, and we are very fortunate to not be one of those institutions.
Yep. And that's why it's not ubiquitous. DEXA is typically over $100,000. The BOD pod is about half that, as you mentioned, underwater
We pay about,
wells.
I'd say $17,000 for our equipment here, and
Okay.
it doesn't have a helium tank for directly measuring. We estimate residual volume.
One thing that you'll like is long term. So if you look out, hit one of the caps. If you look out 5-7 years versus underwater weighing, because you have to take into account the chemicals and the manpower, this is actually less expensive when you break out the cost
And we
long
have to fill
term.
and empty and water and.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of things.
You'll love working with this. This is one of the easiest pieces of equipment. I joke, if you can boil water, but I'm actually serious, you can run a BOD pod test. So any additional questions? So that's a little history about the device, who's using it. If you look at the state of Minnesota, University of Minnesota has one, St. Cloud has the BOD pod. The Minnesota Vikings use the BOD pod. They go to Abbott Hospital to use the device. As I mentioned, Mayo Clinic has several. Winona State has one. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. As I mentioned, the market areas before, that's typically where you'll see them. And when you go on and do your other stuff, you may see them. So I am ready to do a test. So I'm going to, Stacy, have you do a test. And I'll walk you through it. I'll be the nice thing about the BOD pod test is subject involvement. The test is about 5 minutes long. But Brittany, you'll only be involved, and thank you for volunteering, you'll only be involved for about 2 of those 5 minutes. So what we're going to do first is initially do some calibration and enter your demographic information, so you won't have to get in quite yet. Okay? So we're going to begin a test and enter the demographic information and do a body composition assessment. So I need you to put your name here.
Can I just do anything?
Yes, you can do anything. And then password for now is human, all one word, P-E-R, and then 1, 2, 3. Did you?
And I've got that written down.
Human, P-E-R, 1, 2, 3. So the passwords are not case sensitive. Okay. So here you go, a typical Windows menu. So what we're going to do is it shows login, it shows how Ebony logged in. So what's going to happen, until somebody logs out, any test that is done is going to be associated with your name. So you can track and link up records with users and so forth. So we simply go to test and body composition. So here's the first, and again, you just read, it's very easy. It talks about calibrating the scale. This is part of the measurement. This is a body composition system like the hydrostatic weighing. We get your mass on the scale. The only difference is volume is derived from air displacement rather than water. Okay? So it's incumbent that this is accurate because it's basically half the test. This shows the date you last performed the calibration, which was today. I performed it this morning. If this has been 2 weeks, and it says 2 weeks or greater, then it wants you to calibrate it. And you would just click on Calibrate Scale.
So it's not an automatic part of the process, it's just every 2 weeks?
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
Super.
So it will be a part of the quality control, which we go into later. So you shouldn't have issues with this unless you're on a break. So you're on Christmas break, you come back, then if you forget to do the quality control, this is where you can do the portion of the Calibrate Scale. So click Next because that date's good. Okay, so here's where we enter the demographic information. So if you could enter Brittany's information. And any field that has an asterisk is required. The other stuff isn't required.
BRITTAMI.
Thanks again for doing this, Brittany.
ANM.
Okay, sure.
And then he's spelled THIESFELD.
So ID1 and ID2, as I mentioned, is to further delineate records. So if you're testing athletics and you want to be able to segment when you export data, you test women's basketball, you could put women's basketball here, and then you could do a search for just those files and then export just those. If you wanted Stacy's research, you could put Stacy's research, and let's say you have 2 research projects going on, you could put, let's say it's children and elderly, you could put Stacy's research elderly, and it will only call up those records affiliated with that. In ethnicity, it has a selection of general population or African American Black. Click next. So general population. So this next screen is density model. It defaults on what she chose. She chose general population. So typically Siri is used for white, Asian, Hispanic, and so forth. So if you want to change it, it defaulted, but you just click on that arrow and it gives you another choice, which is Brozak. That density model is typically used for athletic populations. So for example, at University of Florida, when they test the football team, for consistency purposes, because they have quite a dynamic with ethnicities, rather than changing back and forth, they use Brozak. So all the players are on Brozak, and subsequent tests are on Brozak. So you're not comparing individual A with one density model, and then the second and third test he had a totally different density model. So it defaults to Siri, so we'll leave it Siri. And then you have an option to do measured or predicted.
And that's residual volume, correct?
It's actually thoracic gas volume,
Okay.
which is indigenous to the BOD pod. Residual volume would be the hydrostatic weighing. When you're sitting in the BOD pod, you're sitting there breathing normally. You'll see when Brittany gets in there. And we want the amount of air that's in your lungs when you're sitting and breathing normally. You're not having to expel out all your air. So our gas volume is thoracic gas volume. It's the amount of air that's in your lungs while you're sitting there. So we can do measured or predicted. We'll do measured. And entered is a selection if somebody came from another school, they know their lung volume. Once we test Brittany, if we test her a second time, a line will appear that says retrieved, and that's what I mentioned earlier. We will not have to measure her lung volume, and you could just select her previous lung volume measurement. So we do measure next. So open the BOD pod door, click next. I'm going to have you do all this. And it's kind of heavy, so just open it all the way. There you go. And it was born in research, so you'll see it's very rudimentary as far as open door, next. There's a process. Then it will say closed door, next. There's a whole process with it. So if you could hit next. Okay. Again, just read and it tells you. Make sure the BOD pod's empty. Is the BOD pod empty?
No.
We need to take that cylinder out.
And we want to be sure that we don't drop it, because it does dent.
Make sure it's empty, install the tube and filter. This is used to measure the lung volume. So, it doesn't matter which end of the tube you plug in here, but it does matter what end of the filter. So, what you want to do is just attach it to the smaller end of the filter, and just so it's snug. Some people ask, do I have to push it all the way there? If you do, I'll give you a prize. 'Cause I don't know. So just so it's snug and tight, so there's no leak. What we'll do is take the large end, and see this port right here? So there's a port here. This is where Stacy's going to attach it. And again, just so it's snug. So close the door, hit next. Again, there's that process. Open next, close next. So this is the built-in calibration. This is the part of each and every test. One of the reasons the test is 5 minutes long is the first portion is entering the demographic information. Then the BOD pod is measuring itself. It's a known volume. This front chamber is about 460 liters. So it's going to go through that, and that's 50 seconds. You see the progress bar? Then it's going to prompt Stacy to put the known volume. And if you drop this volume, then you're going to affect the calibration. So she'll put this in, and then after that we'll have Brittany step on the scale. That's the mash portion, and then from there we'll introduce her into the BOD pod. So open door, it says, and then it says place the 50.063 liter calibration volume in the test chamber. And just so it's on the seat, so now it says, now close the door and click next. Next. So this will start the second point of the calibration, and then you have the progress bar. And when this is going on, you can actually weigh the subject. So this is a reminder. So, and I will go into this a little later, but you want to make sure that the individual isn't wearing jewelry, excessive jewelry, eyeglasses. If you know who Flavor Flav is, he has the big clock. I don't have any clocks or anything. If it's like a wedding ring somebody has never gotten off their finger since they've been married, that's fine. We want consistency. So you know that when you test Judy or Sam the next time, they're going to still have this wedding ring on. But for consistency purposes, no excess stuff. You want two-piece bathing suit, one-piece bathing suit, or a sports bra and compression shorts for a female. Guys would be a Speedo swimsuit or compression shorts. The reason is you want tight-fitting clothing. You don't want Brittany to come in with a skirt hanging, or what's it called, sarong, or whatever one of those things are. So this reminds you, just to kind of check, okay, she looks great, click next, she's got proper clothing protocol, because if she doesn't, it affects the test. So this will tear out the scale. It's clear scale, so you just want to make sure that there's nothing on the scale. Next, tear the scale. So tearing's in progress. This will be a few seconds. Okay, so it says, ask subject to step on scale and then click next. So what I typically say is, Brittany, if you could get on the scale, it's about a 5-second measurement. While you're up there, hold still. If she could step on the scale for 5 seconds, and the measurement's 5 seconds, and then she steps off. Stacy will click next. It's tearing again, essentially 0 now. Okay, so what does it say? It says open the BOD pod door, remove the cylinder, and click next, because you're not going to get in there with the cylinder. You don't have to put it on your lap.
Oh, really?
So, again, this tells you what to do. Ensure they're wearing a cap. Because the hair traps air, you want to compress the hair. So that's why we have you wear a cap. Typically, with females, I think, have it in a ponytail and then wrap it underneath. This stretches, and just try to get as much hair as possible underneath the cap. Some people have it over the ears, some people's ears are out. That doesn't matter. What you want is the hair inside. So have her put on the cap. And they really stretch. We go to the NFL Combine every year, and a lot of those players have dreadlocks.
Big hair, yeah.
Oh, out to there.
And what about the cleaning of that cap, Steve?
You can wash it.
Okay, great.
So now is when you're going to enter the chamber. So I typically, if you could enter the chamber here, Brittany, and I tell her what she can expect. So if you can sit down, please. We're going to do 2 or 3 measurements. You'll hear some pops and clicks. Those are the valves opening and closing while you're inside the BOD. What I need you to do is just relax. Just sit how you're sitting now, hands in your lap, breathe normal. You don't want the subject talking or joking around with somebody in the lab. Just some people close their eyes. It will be 50 seconds. Okay, I'll close the door 50 seconds. Then I'll open the door, and then we'll do an additional test. Okay? Any questions? So you can certainly do that. So they've entered, and now we close the door.
There's a lot of room in there, really.
And then click next.
You've probably been in a smart car. You've been in
So this is the first volume test. Again, similar to when it was empty, it's 50 seconds, and similar to when we had the cylinder in there. Those are those valves opening and closing. Once you all get up and running, it's a 5-minute test. It's longer because we're going through and
And I
explaining
asked
some
you
things.
to hold it. Do you need to see?
So open the BOD pod door. How you doing, Brittany? You okay?
Yeah.
All right. Did you feel anything when you were in there?
No.
Feel okay?
Yep.
Some people, because we're changing the pressure slightly, it's a quick, just make sure they're okay. And then open BOD pod door, click next. Close the door. Yep.
Okay.
And then click next. So this is the second volume test.
So they're each about 50
They're 50
seconds.
seconds, yep.
Okay.
Anytime you see this going across the screen, it's 50
50
seconds. Yeah.
seconds,
And
okay.
whether you're doing some quality control, whether you're measuring a cylinder. So really, of the 5-minute test, subject involvement is less than 2 minutes. Okay, so open the BOD pod door, and this is the part where it says review the thoracic gas volume if necessary. So we're going to do that because this is the first time we're doing it. So this is where the tube and filter are going to come in handy. So typically what I do to enhance compliance if it's the first time is I take the tube and filter off, and I simulate what Brittany can expect while she's in the BOD pod. So what we're going to do now, Brittany, is we've measured your body volume. What is essentially going to happen is I'm going to move the computer screen over, and it's going to instruct you when to put the tube in your mouth, okay? And you're going to put the tube in your mouth, create a nice seal, and plug your nose. And breathe normally as you can with a tube in your mouth. So you do that for 10-15 seconds. Again, this will prompt you. It'll say breathe, and there'll be a cadence, in, out. And try to follow the cadence that this shows you. There'll be a bar that goes up and down. And then it will say prepare to huff, okay? And that is your signal to not huff yet, but get ready to huff, okay? And then it will prompt you to huff. And I want you to huff 3 times. It's similar to, did you wear glasses? Sometimes, okay. So if you wear glasses or sunglasses, you fog them up to clean them. So it's real light. It's not blowing out something like a birthday cake. It's out, out, out 3 times. You can't huff too lightly, okay? So that's the maneuver. And then you're finished. So to demonstrate that, I'm gonna simulate what's gonna happen. So pretend on the computer screen, if you will, and it says put tube in mouth. So put the tube in the mouth. What did she forget?
Plug your nose.
Yep, plug your nose. So she's gonna do that, and then she'll be prompted to prepare to huff. Don't huff yet. And then it's gonna say huff. But when it says huff, and I'll tell you in a second, the BOD pod is gonna occlude this valve. So there will be resistance. Right now it's free flowing. So when I do that, a shutter will occlude this valve, and I want you to then go, so 3 times, all right? So breathe normal, and huff. Good. Do you feel that resistance when I plugged it? The reason I do this beforehand is if you put them in there and they huff, they're breathing freely, and all of a sudden the valve closes, people will take the tube out of their mouth. It startles them because they're not breathing free-flowingly, if that's a word. Okay, so you want to try this?
Yep.
All right, so I'll attach it here. So again, just to review, this will prompt you to put tube in mouth, plug nose. There will be a cadence. Try to match that cadence of breathing in and out. Then it will say prepare to huff, don't huff yet. It will say huff. Then it's and try to maintain a tight seal. It's just out, 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 okay? All right. So,
And then
we
don't you
reviewed
take
it.
the tube out after?
Yes, and then once you're, after the 3 huffs, you're finished. So, click next, excuse me. Okay, so we instructed her. Now, let's move this over so she can see it. And close the door, and then, if you can see it, give me a thumbs up, okay? If you can see this. Can you see it? Okay. So, you're going to click next to start the measurement. And not yet, so it's just, that's the cadence that I was talking about, that's in and out. It will tell her to put tube in the mouth. Prepare to put tube in mouth. Now put tube in mouth. She plugs her nose. Perfect. This will go about 10 seconds. Here's the cadence I want her to do. So it's in, out. So try to follow that. And then it's going to say prepare to huff, and then huff. Good. She's done. All right. So you can open the door. I'll move this for you. You okay?
Yep. Good job.
All right. So we click next, and this is where we determine if she complied with the maneuver properly. Okay. So it will tell you whether or not you have performed the maneuver correctly. And it says merit and airway pressure results are high. Merit is the compliance with the maneuver, okay? How well she did. It's typically, if it's high, you may have broken the seal a little bit. So just try to maintain a tight seal. And the airway is how hard she huffed. You huffed too hard. And I knew you were going to get at least high on that because you were... Again, it's just practice for me. Pretend there's a feather on your hand. Huff 3 times. And it's perfect. It's just out, out, out. Real light. You can't huff too light. I can't stress that enough. So let's try it again.
Okay.
So that tells you, so you can essentially repeat TGV. And we'll turn this.
Okay.
Any questions about it? Okay. Pardon me. So let's try it again. Maintain that tight seal. That looked better. Let's see. Airway definitely looked better. So I'll move the cart. You can,
Okay.
excuse me. All right. So click next. Okay. So this you don't get the failures or the notices. So I have to say, good job.
Oh, okay,
Good job. So here we go. It says it provides her measured thoracic gas volume, which is 3.5. Are you an athlete?
Yeah.
What do you?
Basketball.
Basketball. So I kind of figured that by this, and I'll talk about that later about her value, which is good. And this talks about the merit in airway. It doesn't say it's high. If it's high or if it fails, it will tell you. So merit, you want to be under 1.0. She was 0.02. So excellent compliance on that one. Before it was really high. Airway pressure, you want to be under 35. Anywhere under 35. If you're 30, if you're 2, that's fine. She was 50. Excellent. So this is a good test. So we can hit next. Ask the subject to step out. And then if you could close the door. And then it says click on these cords. Click on next to see the test results. So you can do that, Stacy. Next. Okay. So this gives the results. What you need to, what's your activity though? Are you very active, active?
I'm not right now. I'd like to have done nothing for a month.
Okay,
Like
so
working on
low activity or active?
it. Low.
Okay, we'll select low activity. And that's for the total energy expenditure. So it gives you body composition information as well as metabolic information. So resting metabolic rate and total energy expenditure. So you can click next and we'll print the results. Print. So the results are instantaneous. Starting. Maybe that was the first one that got jammed a little bit. So it stores the data automatically.
Is it
And
printing out the record, like the report?
It is,
Okay.
exactly. Basically the last screen, and I can share that with you. So here's what the printout looks like. We have
Straight up.
like this.
Yep.
We have Brittany's demographic information that Stacy entered. We have the density model, and that we did a measured thoracic gas volume. Here are the results. So it's broken down into two compartments similar to hydrostatic weighing. So you have the percentage of fat-free mass or lean mass, and then it breaks it up according to pounds of fat mass and fat-free mass, and the total weight, the body volume as measured in the BOD pod, her density, and then her thoracic gas volume measurement. This table was derived from the American Council of Exercise and a few other publishing organizations. You probably heard of Victor Catch and Catch. So this is not BOD pod's rating table, if you will. I've seen others out there, World Health Organization, Mayo Clinic. It's more age related. So this gives you a general basis for males and females and gives the category risky, excess fat, moderately lean, lean, ultra lean, and risky, too low. So women want to be under 30%. and Brittany was under 30%. She's considered moderately lean, which is excellent. And this information is on the corner left, you'll see when I share this with you, is the resting metabolic rate. So how many calories she burns at rest. And then based on her activity level, whether she's sedentary all the way to very active, is her total energy expenditure. So taking into account any exercise she's doing, work, and so forth, above and beyond just living and breathing. So that's essentially what a printout looks like. The metabolic portion of the BOD pod is not indirect calorimetry. What it's based on is a formula. The BOD pod is considered the most accurate device in the field for research for body composition. So if you have an accurate device to assess fat mass and fat-free mass, then you will get an accurate value for this metabolic measurement. And what it's based on is those two components. It's based on the Nelson formula, which was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And again, it's based on those two compartments of fat mass and fat-free mass. So if you were using a different modality, let's say skin-fold caliber, with the Nelson formula, it wouldn't be as accurate because the body composition portion isn't accurate. So it's another value to add. It's quick. You don't have to fast like you do with indirect calorimetry. It's another value to add if you're providing information for the community or, let's say, a athletic team. So you go to the test line. So what's the date on there?
11:30. Good.
Don't have to calibrate. That's just a safety precaution, calibration precaution.
Okay.
So,
Okay. We need demographic info.
Allie, A-L-L-I. Ann, A-N-N. Haber, H-O-E-F-E-R.
Date of birth.
0216.
any of the fields that have an asterisk, those are required. The fields that don't have an asterisk, those are not required. So you may run into situations, HIPAA, privacy laws, you don't have to put in people's names.
Inches. General population.
So these are the defaults, they look good.
Okay. Open BOD pod door. It's open. Make sure BOD pod is empty. It is empty. Install filter and breathing tube.
Grab one of these for you.
Put it on the small end so it's snug.
Thank you. Go.
Now we're going to install it. The door. Click next. And it's calibrating. Okay.
So the process is open the door, click next, close the door, click next. And just so the cylinder's on the seat, upright.
Oh, doesn't say close the door yet.
Very good catch. So click next.
And we close the door.
In research, you want everything consistent, so that's why it's set up that way. And why the 2-point calibration is because you want to ensure the accuracy and validity of the BOD pod each and every test. So it's a built-in quality control.
Okay, so now we're gonna make sure that she's wearing only approved clothing, no jewelry, eyeglasses, shoes or socks. She's in a two-piece bathing suit, and we'll need to put the cap on over her hair.
Put that on after later.
Okay.
So do the scale first. Tear the scale.
So we're making sure that the scale, that there's nothing on the scale, and there isn't. So we're gonna tear it
So we're zeroing it out.
and step on the scale and stand still. It'll be about 5 seconds. Okay, you can step off.
So it tears, zeroes out once again.
Okay, so now we're gonna open the door and take out our known volume.
And here's the cap.
So this is where we're gonna make sure she's wearing the cap.
And she's going to wear this because there is essentially isothermic air that's in the hair, so the cap compresses that. If she gets in the BOD pod without the cap, then
That's pretty
the
impressive.
measurement's going to be inaccurate.
Okay, so now you can get in the BOD pod.
Same reason she's wearing a bathing suit.
Just kind of, yep, sit normally, relax, breathe normally. We're just gonna shut the door for about 50 seconds. So just kind of breathe and do what you're doing.
And you'll hear pops and clicks. That's normal. Those are the valves opening and closing. Okay?
Okay. Now we're gonna open the door.
And you will perform 2 or 3 volume measurements. So this will be the second one. Why you would perform 3? The BOD pod will prompt you. It will say the first 2 volume measurements were inconsistent. We haven't seen that yet because when we did Brittany's, hers were consistent. If it does arise, it's because those 2 volume measurements weren't within 0.2% of one another, which is only about 150 liters. And that's incredible. As far as our specs. So if it falls outside of that, if it was one for measurement A was 190 milliliters difference from measurement B, then it would prompt you, say inconsistent. Why you would see that is some people shake their leg in there. So as I mentioned before, you want to remain relatively still because we are changing pressure in there. So if somebody's shaking their leg or laughing, then typically you'll get first 2 volume measurements inconsistent. We highly recommend a third. And then it takes the average of the closest 2. One other thing I want to point out before you continue is behind her left knee is a blue button. That illuminates, lights up when the BOD pod is engaged, when the magnets are engaged, about 5 seconds after the door is shut. Why you point that out is you can't get caught in the BOD pod. So if somebody did have an issue, again, claustrophobia, most common question, but I've done thousands of tests. I've never had to cancel a test because of the way that's designed and she's not in there long. But you could if you wanted to get out. You're not trapped. She would simply press this. This disengages or de-energizes the magnets, and you could simply walk out. You can also just hit escape, or you could hit cancel on the BOD pod, or you could just pull the plug. But those are ways that if you needed to discontinue a test for whatever reason, you can do that. So.
Okay. Okay, we're going to do another measurement. Stay still.
Actually, we got that message I was saying.
All
The
right.
first 2 If you could open the door, just so. So as I mentioned, if your first two volume measurements aren't within 0.2%, then it will prompt you for a third measurement. Typically, there was some movement, or sometimes people are chewing gum in there, something. In any event, they're very tight specs. So this happened. It said first and second volume measurements inconsistent. A third volume measurement is required. It's our specification. So we need to do a third one. Just try to.
Okay, one more 50 seconds.
This is where we'll do the rest of the song. So I would take out the ready and just kind of go through.
So we're first going to have you put this, after you sit in here for a little bit, you're going to be prompted to huff 3 times, and it's going to be very gentle and light. In your mouth. You're going to try and breathe. According to it's going to say in and out, so try and breathe like that. Following what's on the computer screen, and then it's going to tell you to get ready to huff. Then it's going to ask you to huff 3 times, and you're going to huff like you're trying to move a feather, so very, very lightly. So let's just start from the beginning. So you're going to go. Perfect. So let's try it with the tube. Plug your nose. And you're going to feel a little bit more resistance when you're doing this, so don't get worried.
And you want her to huff as soon as you plug it. You didn't plug that, did you?
So
just, there you go.
So you can feel that it's a little bit different than if you're just breathing normally.
She was simulating what the BOD pod's going to do, so her hand going over the end of the filter. The BOD pod will occlude the valve with the shutter, and so therefore there will be resistance. We want you to huff against that resistance.
Feel comfortable already?
Yep.
Okay. Let us know if you can see it as it comes up with the screen.
Do this again. So her merit and airway were too high. Same thing that happened with Brittany, so you just need to repeat it, and it tells you high. Just what I would recommend is, merit is typically compliance. Why this may be high is if you broke the seal either during just putting the tube in your mouth or the huff. A lot of times, I don't know, I couldn't hear you, but when you were huffing through the tube, if any air leaked out, that will usually be a clue. Okay? So just try it again, maintain a tight seal, huff ever so lightly, it should be good.
Okay, we'll try it again.
And obviously, because some people huff, it says prepare to huff. Some people don't huff, they forget to huff. So,
Okay.
and you'll hear the valve. Now listen, okay? Merit has to be under 1.
Yep.
Merit is the compliance of the maneuver, which she was high, and we were able to identify she was breaking the seal. That's why it was high. Airway pressure needs to be under 35. Why this would be high is someone's huffing too hard. She had that down. Again, I said it before, you can't huff too lightly.